Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I'm Mark Golub. Welcome to a L'Chaim Roundtable in the immediate aftermath of the elections of 2016, in which Donald Trump has been elected as the 45th President of the United States. And he'll now begin governing our country with a Republican Senate and a Republican House of Representatives. It was not the election results which most people expected. As we have chronicled on JBS since the primary season began more than a year ago, this presidential cycle was tumultuous, tortuous to many, and characterized by vilifications on both sides. But America went to the polls and issued in this next new chapter in the American saga. And on this edition of L'Chaim, we want to ask what the results of this election in terms of the White House and in terms of Congress, what does this all mean for American Jewry and the State of Israel? The age-old mantra we so often ask, is it good for the Jews? And I'm joined by four extremely thoughtful individuals who'll be sharing their insights with us. Let me introduce them to you. As always, we're joined by Steven Bayme, Director of the Contemporary Jewish Life Department of the American Jewish Committee and the Director of the AJC's Koppelman Institute on American Jewish-Israeli Relations. Thane Rosenbaum is a Distinguished Fellow at NYU Law School, the Director of the Forum on Law, Culture, and Society, and an award-winning essayist and novelist whose most recent work is entitled How Sweet It Is, the Story of Jewish Life in Miami in the Watershed Year of 1972. Kenneth Bobb is the National President of the Progressive American Zionist Organization, Ameinu, and Ken also chairs the American Zionist Movement. And joining us for the first time is Barbara Fix, a passionate Zionist from South Africa, who many of you may know from her weekly radio program on WVOX in Westchester. And I'm so pleased to have all four of you with me. Thank you very, very much, as always. As I said in the open, very few people expected the results we saw. As I was planning to sit with the four of you before the election, and I knew we were going to meet together immediately afterward, this was not, I did not imagine we would have a Donald Trump presidency, but we do. And my interest is twofold. I believe that it was so surprising to so many people. I want to give you a chance just to share any thoughts you may have with the JBS audience and all four of us listening to you. And then after that, I do want to go to the main theme of our program is, whoever's president, what's it mean for Israel? And I have to tell you, if Hillary Clinton had in fact won, I was going to say to you, I don't want to hear the name Donald Trump. I only want to talk about Hillary is now president, what's it mean for Israel? But because this was so stunning, I do want to spend a moment so that the JBS audience gets to hear what you think. Most American Jews vote Democratic, and at least 70%, if not more, in this election. That does not mean there weren't Jews favoring Trump. There were. But I'm interested now in what anything you have to say. Steve, I begin with you. The election results, and I understand you were up late last night.
Right, yeah.
Yes. Okay, you watched the whole thing.
Well, I turned it off at 4. I mean, I knew what the results were.
Okay, but you watched Trump's speech.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
okay.
Right, yeah.
What were your thoughts?
Two major observations, what they're worth. One is, aside from what you just said about the incredible shock of it, that it was the last thing I expected. It was the last thing I expected back a year ago, a year and a half ago, and last week and yesterday. So up until the very end, I expected a very different result. But that said, I had two other observations. One is that I think it's very important to keep in mind that this is a democracy that is 240 years old. It continues to be a democracy based on the rule of law. This was an election that was fought for fair and square. And in a democracy, some candidates win, some candidates are going to lose. What I said, I addressed the Rabbinical Assembly about 6 months ago, and the question was raised at that point, what do you foresee in terms of a Trump victory? I had 4 simple words. We will survive. Three words. We will survive as a republic, as a society. American democracy is incredibly strong. And in that respect, while this campaign was very upsetting in a lot of ways, I have every confidence that we will have 4 years. There will be areas of agreement, areas of disagreement, but American democracy will continue. My second observation, if I can...
I just want to say, I appreciate that attitude so much, and I'm glad it's the first thing expressed.
Okay. The second part is perhaps the flip side of it, is that this was the nastiest campaign that I can recall, and I've been around for many, many campaigns. The country is, Hillary Clinton said it actually quite well this morning when she said, the country is more divided than we ever imagined. That was reflected in the voting. It was reflected in the campaign style, which was incredible vilification of one group against another. It pitted Americans of different orientations against other Americans. The main challenge confronting President Trump will be, can you bring the country together? Can you serve as a healer? Can you put aside the kind of vitriol that colored so much of this campaign, including some of his own rhetoric, as well as others perhaps who were associated with the campaign that he may not have had direct responsibility for? Can you overcome that vitriol and replace it with a sense of we're all in this together? He said it beautifully, I thought, last night. When he said, I will be president of all Americans.
Yes.
He understood that. The question then becomes, can he follow through on that? Will that color his administration, or will the administration be one of greater divisiveness?
Okay. Well said. Thane, your response.
Well, it demonstrates that we don't all live in the same country. There's an incredible amount of divisiveness, and Trump kept telling everyone, I don't think you understand how much support I have. People in blue states like New York thought he was a fringe candidate. He was a novelty act. He was a reality TV star masquerading as a presidential contender. He's wandering around saying, everywhere I go, there's 15,000 people. And his core supporters said, yeah, how is he not going to win? I mean, Hillary could gather that many people together only if she had Beyonce and Jay-Z. Mm-hmm. This guy did it everywhere he went. And so he felt the will of the people. And it really is astonishing. I mean, I don't know how the polling industry can still stay in business after this. But I do think that, look, you may remember I was on your program during the primaries because I was very involved in the Jeb Bush campaign. And when Jeb pulled out of that campaign, I remember coming on this program and saying, I don't know what's going to happen, but whatever it is, I won't be surprised. Mm-hmm. I think at that point I had become a believer that there's something that Trump is offering that doesn't appeal to a number of people in New York, but it's clearly resonating around the country. I mean, when I was in New Hampshire with the Bush campaign, there wasn't one Trump sign on any lawns. There were Bush signs everywhere. We had 300 people canvassing everywhere we went from Manchester, New Hampshire. Trump had nobody. He won. And so I think he was saying all along, I think you're underestimating the will of the people and the antagonisms towards the elite. And that's what we saw last night.
Beautifully said. Okay, Barbara, it is lovely having you here for the first time. You also saw the election. You are from South Africa, but you're living here a long time, yes?
Yes.
What was your response as you watched the returns come in last night?
I had an interesting perspective. Firstly, I am a Trump supporter, not because I support Trump, but because I did want to see change. I felt the present administration had really steered us in the wrong direction. I am very passionate about Israel, so that is where my heart is. As a result of my interest in Israel, I've become very interested in foreign policy and how every country in the Middle East affects Israel, whether it's one of the worst offenders, which is Iran, to watching Syria and Iraq and the whole of the Middle East. I have a sign in my car that says vote for Trump. I have met Mike Pence and very impressed by him in the little time that I spent with him. And many people said to me, how can you put a sign voting for Trump on your car? Aren't you fearful that your car will be damaged? Which meant that there were many people who felt like me, which meant that there were many closet Trump supporters. I would like to move to say how impressed I was. I too stayed up late. I did want to hear his speech because he's not a great orator. But when he spoke, I felt the hurtfulness about this country, being an immigrant, I love this country so much, and the divisiveness of the country offended me. And when he said, I want to bind the wounds of division and come together, suddenly I felt such a warmth that this man may, in fact, rise to the occasion. Mm-hmm. He might have the depth that we misjudge him. He wants to reach everybody. He asked those people who didn't vote for him to please come up and give advice and ask him, and he wants to work with them and help them. I hope we heal. I hope he can heal us.
Okay. But wait, I want to interrupt you only for one moment. Sloan, I want to show the audience just a couple of highlights from Donald Trump's remarks yesterday. As Barbara said and Steve alluded to as well, I was very moved by what I heard. I know, again, in the Jewish community, that's not fashionable to say. But if one only read what he said and didn't know it came from Trump, there were a lot of things there which I hoped he would say, and he did. So let's play it. It's only about a minute long, but here are just three very short clip highlights of Donald Trump after, at the end of the long, long election night. Here it is.
Hillary has worked very long and very hard over a long period of time, and we owe her a major debt of gratitude for her service to our country. I mean that very sincerely. I pledge to every citizen of our land that I will be president for all Americans, and this is so important to me. For those who have chosen not to support me in the past, of which there were a few people, I'm reaching out to you for your guidance and your help so that we can work together and unify our great country. So it's been what they call a historic event, but to be really historic, we have to do a great job. And I promise you that I will not let you down. We will do a great job. We will do a great job.
Donald Trump speaking at the end of a long election night. Obviously, by the way, we're taping the morning after the election. And even though you're seeing it a couple days later, this is really right after the election. Do you want to add anything else, Barbara?
Yes, I want to add the fact that I was very interested in the advisors that Trump has taken. Jason Greenblatt and David Friedman were very clear that the relationship with Israel needs to improve. As we know, there was antagonism between the president.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to hold that because that's going to be part of the what does it mean now.
Okay.
Okay? Ken, you have been a huge supporter of Hillary Clinton, an articulate spokesperson for the Democratic perspective. Again, it had to be a very disappointing night for you, and at the same time, I just want to hear how you reacted and how you just feel at the moment.
Sure. First of all, I agree with what's been said, particularly by Steve, in terms of we're a democracy. Absolutely. And we live by that. And as the president said in his words, we'll wake up in the morning and the sun will rise. And I very much identify with this. And I also identify with the comments made by my co-panelists about the importance to overcome the divisiveness and some of the things that were said that were, as people would say, less presidential. You know, I'm reading a biography of Truman right now, and I learned that when he first ran for local office in Missouri, he was asked by the Ku Klux Klan to accept their endorsement, and he considered it until he found out that he would have to come out against the Catholics, and he was supported by the Catholic political boss. Well, we now have a president who was endorsed by the Ku Klux Klan. He didn't seek their endorsement. He was given it.
Right.
David Duke tweeted today that Trump won because of huge support from David Duke followers. We heard Trump do his comments about women, immigrants, Muslims. there's enormous amount of repair he needs to do to fulfill those lofty words about taking care of the wounds in this country, representing everyone. I hope he's up to the task. As an American, I truly hope he's up to the task. Thane said something interesting about there's another America out there. My daughter lives in Israel, and her Israeli boyfriend and my daughter came for a family simcha this summer, and he visited America for the first time. And he is a civics and history teacher. And he ate it all up. We went to Washington, to the monuments, to the Smithsonian. And afterwards, I said to him, you've been teaching this in a classroom in Israel, and you watch movies and television shows. How has America and the reality matched up to America that you've heard and read about? And he'd also been listening to the radio in the car when we drive around with NPR on, and he'd say, which America? And I thought for someone who came to this country for 3 weeks during a political season, he understood maybe before even I fully understood.
That
there are a lot of Americas out there.
A lot of Americas.
A lot. It's not
just
it's not two. No, there's a lot of Americas out there, and maybe that's what the media and the pollsters and everyone didn't successfully pick up on.
Okay. I anchored a newscast last night for the Russian Television Network of America. So I'm watching this from 6 o'clock till after 3 o'clock when he gave his acceptance speech. And I was flabbergasted. I went on the air and said, this is going to be a very short night. By 9 o'clock, we're going to know who's president. I was totally wrong, and I believe I was snookered by what the media and the polls have been telling us. And I believe that one of the things that Americans are very upset with is the extent to which journalism is no longer journalism. It is, in some way, partisan politics masquerading as journalism. And I think America understands it and resents it. But when you watched, whether it was CNN or MSNBC, whether you watched ABC or NBC, whether you watched Fox, there was a tendent to it. And there wasn't simply, let me tell you, the audience, what's happening, and then you make up your own mind. One of the things that I also feel is that while I expected Hillary to win, I would have, in many ways, I thought it would have been good for America, better than Trump. I also feel that the way in which Trump was portrayed was a function of partisan politics, not a function of objective reporting. And the example I will give you is this. By the way, Trump did not win because uneducated racists voted for him. He won, he only lost college-educated women by 3 points to Hillary Clinton. That was astounding. He won white men college-educated. People were saying it's only high school educated. That's not what happened here. He got more Latino vote than Mitt Romney did. I was told he was going to get nothing. If Hillary had gotten the Latino vote that Obama had gotten, he'd be president of the United States. This was not simply a racist slice of America that elected Donald Trump. And when you point out it's many Americas, it's much more nuanced than the media have made it out to be. Now, I want to ask you one question, and I've been saying this over and over on JBS. I was very careful. I never came out for Hillary. I never came out for Trump. I said and I'm looking at the desk I sit on when I do the interviews with the journalists. I said to them, I just want to know what you see happening. Now, I want to know, where did you hear Trump on the campaign say something against women?
Well, I mean,
on the campaign. What speech, what comment did he ever make in public against women? By the way, we all know now what his attitudes are towards women.
That's what I'm talking about.
However, it was never part of his professional persona in front of any crowd. He never got up in front of America and ever said one bad thing about women.
We don't need, Mark, we don't need him to get up in front of America when we need to know who the person is.
Just a minute.
What was so unusual about this campaign was that was a disqualifying, the bus experience with Billy Bush was a disqualifying event from almost any other candidate.
Obviously not.
I believe what I'm saying is true. For him, it wasn't.
Okay, I only know this. I don't want anybody bugging me in the privacy of my car or the privacy of a bus. I don't want people to know what I say to my wife. If I have a private conversation.
That wasn't to his wife, Mark.
My point is.
He's a public figure and with Entertainment Tonight.
It was not a public moment. This was a mic, just like there was a mic when Barack Obama was whispering to the president of Russia. I'm only saying that although I understand, we know, I want to say we don't know what Hillary says in the privacy of her bus. When we read what WikiLeaks tells us, it's very upsetting. My only point is, I'm not in any way endorsing Trump. What I am saying is that there was something that bothered the Americas you talked about, and it was, this is a cheap shot, incidentally.
That was a cheap shot?
Yes, and I'll tell you why. I have been fortunate enough to be in many, many different kinds of social situations, just by happenstance. You know, I ran a softball team, a national softball team, for 25 years, ultimately won a national championship. I know how softball players, and I'm not talking about low-class people. I'm talking about what does a locker room sound like? And when Trump got off that bus, he was a perfect gentleman to that woman. And yes, he said what he said, it was crude. But my own feeling was, if we're going to know what Trump says in the privacy of a bus, I want to know what Hillary says in the privacy of her bus. And I'm saying that one of the things that bothered America was that things that were not part of the public record, by the way, it turns out for both people, became part of this campaign in a very ugly way.
Look, I just have to really disagree with you on this, Mark. I think that is how he treats women and all the accusations of sexual harassment and sexual attack and how he spoke at one of us, that's who our president is now. That's part of the public record. Public figures have to understand that. Hillary, of all people, understands. She's the most examined, understood candidate. That's one of the reasons why she lost. Because people wanted change and wanted something new. And so I think that you can say, I accept that who he is and I'll still vote for him. Obviously, that's what happened. But to say that it wasn't legitimate that people would know that, I think that's just public life today.
It's his public life because his privacy was invaded.
But it wasn't just that.
What was it?
Well, he publicly mocked, I believe, on the debate stage, Carly Fiorina's appearance.
By the way, he didn't. The comment about Carly Fiorina, which he made, was made in private, and he thought it was off the record. There was a journalist in the room who then reported it. It was never said on the debate stage.
Okay, what about the tweet what about the tweet he sent out showing a photo of his wife and a photo of Cruz's wife, and then said, enough said?
Yes, and by the way,
his Megyn Kelly comments.
The problem there was that what we saw was a candidate who strikes back. This was a reaction to something that Ted Cruz's campaign had done. Again, this not that I'm not in any way condoning any of it. I'm only saying that it's interesting to me.
You think it was overplayed?
Oh,
given
what it was.
Yes,
and the reality was that when he got up and spoke, as Hillary got up and spoke, we know what John Kennedy was and what Ted Kennedy was. We know what Bill Clinton was, and we know how Hillary Clinton facilitated it. But the reality is, in this campaign, when people got up, I'm only saying that it was easy to ridicule Donald Trump. It's more subtle, it's more complicated, and in the end, America didn't care.
Well, some people in America cared. I must say, one of the things in our opening comments I was going to say, what I'm really concerned about now, actually, is how young people are going to handle this. You know, my own daughters, and I'm seeing on Facebook all morning, young activists, how they're going to handle this. Now, I will go back to something that Steve said as well. You know, my reaction to many of them has been, I've been through this too. You know, I was a child of the 60s, and I remember when Nixon was elected.
Yes.
And I said, how are we ever going to escape
Yes,
from Nixon?
yes.
You know what? We came out of it. He helped us.
That's Steve's
He
point.
turned out to be a criminal, and he was impeached. So there's hope.
Yes.
And so my point is that, but I am concerned, by the way, how young people feel in a lot of ways violated. Young women feel violated, and you should not minimize this, Mark. I must tell you.
Okay.
I'm going to respectfully disagree with your
Fair enough.
comments.
Okay, Barbara, you're a woman. You do get to comment.
There's a much bigger picture, guys. There's a bigger picture. The picture isn't just about women. The picture is that the country is concerned about many things. They're concerned about domestic policies. They're concerned about security. They're concerned about international things. They want to know, are there ISIS people coming into the country? There's a much bigger picture than just women. So this is a minute little piece. I think people also understood this came from a situation where you had one incumbent who was following on from an administration. And what could she do? She couldn't really defend her record because her record wasn't fabulous. So she had there were pointers at pointing to the other candidate and demeaning the other candidate.
But forgive me, you're not really addressing Bob's
the point
Ken's
about
point.
I
about
agree with
women.
his many issues, but how about the women's
the-
issues? I think what Mark's asking.
I think that the woman issue is so small in
Were you
relationship.
offended as a woman?
No, because I see the bigger picture, and I think women see the bigger picture. And I think women feel that, just as you alluded to, they were pointing at Trump, but not looking at Mr. Clinton. Bill Clinton.
He wasn't a candidate.
Bill Clinton, but she condoned his behavior.
Yeah,
She defended a rape victim and made fun
No,
of
that's
that
not
and
true.
laughed
That was
about
actually
it.
disproved.
And so there were other sides, there were facets that people didn't want to look at. That was the thing.
But Barbara, even accepting your hypothesis that, as you say, the picture is much bigger, my friends on the left like to talk about intersectionality, which means that if you're attacking one particular aspect, there are other dimensions of it that are going to fall into play. Those who were offended by Trump's rhetoric were not focusing on one particular aspect. They were focusing on a wide variety of comments that were made. The Gold Star American family that he attacked, those within the campaign, if not he himself, who introduced issues related to the portrayal of Jews, the question about immigrants, the question about Muslims.
Tell us about Jews. I don't know of that.
Well, look, at the beginning of the campaign, there were tweets that you could argue could be misinterpreted, misunderstood, but they raised the hackles of Jews, this issue about the Star of David and where they came from.
Please, wasn't that silly?
Mark, I'm not going to dwell on that. I'm saying that simply historical reconstruction.
But it was so silly.
Perhaps too much was made of it. However, towards the end,
Are you saying to me you do think there was somebody in the Trump campaign who picked that star to in some way convey anti-Semitism?
I think there was insensitivity. Okay, towards the end of the campaign, it crossed the line.
How?
The attacks on journalists, the global conspiracy, which was his last ad. These gave rise to a great deal of offense. Taken by itself, I might accept your point. I'm saying there is an intersectionality here, that it's a broader picture, a broader rubric. In that broader rubric, there were a great many people that were offended by Trump's rhetoric, and that is part of the divisiveness that took place within this campaign.
Yes, I don't disagree with that.
Okay,
You're
so
absolutely
frankly,
right.
I think we have to get, number one, we have to get past it in the sense of we are talking about unifying the country. There needs to be an acknowledgement that we're all in this together.
Yes.
There are dimensions of this rhetoric that really have no place in public political discourse. I don't think that focusing on one dimension, any one of these aspects taken by themselves would have amounted to all that much. But the overall portrait that was created, that was constructed, was that of a very polarizing campaign. I think we have to get past that.
And were they both polarizing?
Was the polarization coming from both sides?
Yes.
If you're talking about supporters, definitely. As far as the candidates themselves are concerned, I think Hillary Clinton's rhetoric was considerably more moderate.
Were you upset that she used the word deplorable?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Okay.
That had no place.
By the way,
Mark, by the way, are you familiar with the ADL's work on the rise of anti-Semitism during the campaign? I mean, what Jewish journalists have been under
what do you
from
mean?
Trump supporters?
What do you mean a Jewish journalist? What Jewish journalist has been given grief by the Trump campaign?
No, by the supporters
By
of Trump.
supporters.
By supporters of Trump.
You know, you made the point I thought was very apt. And again, my problem here is I wish there was somebody here who wanted to say what I'm saying, because I don't want to be misconstrued. I am not supporting Trump. What I am saying was I felt that the media portrayal of Trump, which was then used by the Clinton campaign, was not fair. And I believe Americans didn't like it. And I don't know what the ADL has said. I know, and I'm not here to bash the ADL. I only know the ADL has its own needs and its own interests. I don't know of any, I didn't see any Jewish journalist write a piece that somehow he was being in any way attacked by the Clinton campaign. And your point was...
Trump campaign.
I'm sorry, the Trump campaign. And your point was that when David Duke wanted to endorse Donald Trump, that's not Donald Trump's fault, and he never said a word in support of that endorsement. That's not the issue.
Right. What he needs to do now, what his people need to do then, is react to what's going on now, attacking Jewish journalists, attacking...
How have they been attacked?
Non-stop on Twitter. You go look at any of them. It's Jeffrey Goldberg, it's Jane Eisner, Peter Beinart, whoever they are. And they're on a non-stop attack by anti-Semites telling them to get out of the country. And the problem is there's an atmosphere that encourages this.
Okay.
So if the president-elect is now talking about unification, he has to take action against the
agree
David
with you.
Dukes,
I agree
against the
with you.
KKK.
I agree with you.
He can't sit quietly.
I agree, and it'll be interesting to see whether what we heard from him on Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, is what his entire presidency becomes. And there are people who are skeptical. He'll have to prove it.
That's right.
But at least I want to give him a chance. In the same spirit that Steve spoke and that Barack Obama spoke,
Absolutely.
and I thought he was fabulous.
No,
just
absolutely.
fabulous.
Mark, there's no disagreements on that. I think the only real disagreement is that you focus on this unfair treatment
Yes.
of Trump.
Yes.
My comment is that it's, again, intersectionality. It's not one issue, it's a range of issues. But as far as Jews are concerned specifically, if you want to get into that, if you look at this campaign historically.
Okay, I want to make sure everyone understands. We are going to part 2 of the discussion now.
all right.
The real
But
issue
can I
is,
ask one question of you
Yes, but-
before we get to that?
hold on, yeah?
So are you of the view that the treatment of Trump and his rhetorical either gaffes or
Yes.
insensitivities was overplayed more so than the emails of Hillary Clinton? By the
1,000%.
I agree that
1,000%.
yes.
And
He
Because
was.
that's
he
really
was,
the key.
You know, by the way,
that's
he
really
was
your
painted
point.
with
You
an
know,
ugly
that's
brush.
really your
you know,
point.
there's a show on MSNBC every morning called Morning Joe.
Yeah.
And it tends to skew liberal. And Joe Scarborough said something very interesting the morning after the election. He said to someone who said, you know, I don't know how we're now going to tell our daughters. What do we tell our daughters about the President of the United States, given all the things he said about women? Joe Scarborough said, what would people have told their daughters about America having elected someone who should be in jail? And I'm not saying she should be in jail, but I certainly believe that there was so many issues around the emails. I do think it would be very difficult for somebody who was not running for president, and I did not want to see her indicted her. She's running for president, and I do understand, and I know I'm saying something which many Americans don't agree with. I do think the reality of life is kings and princes are not treated the same as the ordinary folk. We expect it. A person in Hillary Clinton's, where she was in life, you're running for president, she would have had to do something enormously egregious before anybody should have indicted her. And I think that the head of the FBI, Mr. Comey, Director Comey, made a serious mistake in the last weeks of the election. That being said, There are many Americans who say, if I had done what she did, I'd be in jail. How do I explain that to my son or my daughter, who says to me, how do we elect the president? So what Scarborough was saying was, it's not black and white. This entire thing is nuanced, and all I want to do is give Trump now, in your spirit, I want to give him a chance. I want to see if he can morph. And you talked about Nixon. I remember Reagan. I remember how upset all of us were when Ronald Reagan, it was the end of the world. We elected an actor to be president of the United States. You know, now both Republicans and Democrats talk about Reagan as if he was a great president. Yeah. I want to see what happens. I agree with all those of you who have said the country will go on, and I want to see if Trump can morph. And I've seen people appointed to the Supreme Court who came in with very strong reputations, hard left, hard right. They moved to the center. The office tends to influence a human being. The human being becomes different. The office, you feel different. I'm hoping that Donald Trump will be a different person.
Look at the Prime Ministers
because the
of Israel.
office in and of itself makes that happen to an individual. And I could be wrong. I was wrong Tuesday night I was wrong, so I might be wrong on this, but I want to give him the benefit of the doubt, and I feel that the media was so unfair to him that we all expected Hillary to win, and they were wrong, we were wrong. Let's see what happens now.
You know, I have two daughters, and I discuss with my daughters what do they see in the marriage of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And my daughter said,
in the marriage,
in the marriage of Hillary Clinton is married to Bill Clinton, who is known to have philandered, and their marriage is clearly not a great marriage. I mean, he's gone after many women,
by the way,
but they've remained married.
Marriage.
But they've remained married. Now, it's not my business,
right,
but my daughter's. It's not my business,
right.
But my daughter's comments were very interesting. My daughters have said, why in that sort of a marriage? Then you look at Donald Trump, who's been divorced a couple of times, but it looks like his family unit is a family unit that works. And that was the comment that my daughters made.
By the way, Hillary and Bill Clinton have made a family that works.
It's
no less so than Donald Trump.
But my daughters questioned that relationship.
Yeah, I hope you clarified it for them.
Because I clarified it because they were upset about the Monica Lewinsky situation, and that was what bothered them.
Okay.
But I think I agree with you 100% that Donald Trump was really, they tried to pigeonhole him with constantly harassing and a bias and labeling and trying to make him out to be the boogeyman, trying to create a sort of monster out of him. So I did not feel that it was a fair election. I'm not sure that he did the same to her, and even though the WikiLeaks obviously turned on her. It was more WikiLeaks that did the damage. Okay. But he was labeled. He was accused of being friendly with Putin and creating that infiltration. There were so many instances that were just really clearly unjust.
Look, it was a nasty campaign. I think we've said that. I also think we agree with Mark's prescription going forward that, he needs to be given a chance. He's given a tremendous opportunity.
Yes.
And he'll be, we'll wait and see, and we'll judge him accordingly.
I want to now go to the issue. Because we're going to run out of
time.
As far as now, the question is, what's this mean for Israel and the Jews?
Well, my initial comment, I'd like to talk about Israel also. My initial comment in terms of American Jewry, the safeguard of Jewish security in this country, I would say ever since World War II, has been this issue of pluralism, often expressed as separation of church and state, but not exclusively. What it means is that there is no single way of being an American. Rather, there are multiple ways. When President-elect Trump said last night, I want to be the president of all Americans, I was particularly taken with that because it was a reassertion of that American pluralism. We cannot afford to forget about this, though. In other words, that pluralism comes under attack when all sorts of statements are made about particular groupings. And those, again, were nasty statements within the campaign, and frankly, I had very little tolerance for them. But looking forward, the question will become for Jews is, will this country remain as pluralistic as it's been for the last 7 decades? There clearly are elements within America. Some of them are outright anti-Semitic. Others are, would deny being anti-Semitic, but they would also not be favorable to that American pluralism. So I think that's one challenge confronting us as far as where we should stand now. As people who have benefited so much from America, no society in diaspora Jewish history has given as much receptivity and welcome to Jews as Americans and within American society. It behooves us right now to take a distinctively nonpartisan stance, notwithstanding the fact that 70% of American Jews voted for the candidate that did not win. But it behooves us to take a very nonpartisan stance and say, we will work with the legally elected governments of the United States. We're patriotic Americans, and we want to see that administration succeed and not fail.
Okay, and only because you referenced it and given what you do every day. Steve, are you right now worried about anti-Semitism in America?
Frankly, I'm considered quite dovish on anti-Semitism because I really think that anti-Semitism since World War II has been a narrative of eclipse, not a narrative of growth. That said, I think it's also fair to say that the overall trend has been, again, over many years, to keep the lid on, that anti-Semitic expression, anti-Semitic discourse. Sure, you're always going to have crazies running around, and they become more vocal when you have things like Twitter, in which you can say anything in 140 characters. But I think it's also fair to say that that lid that has kept the tensions under wraps, in the nastiness of a campaign like this, that lid could fall away. And I think we saw some of that. I fully agree with you that, no, I don't believe that President-elect Trump is personally anti-Semitic. I think the fact that, yes, he does have a Jewish daughter and a very Jewishly committed son-in-law, that will serve to make anti-Semitism taboo within the immediate confines of the administration. But there's 60 million Americans that voted, and some of them certainly come from this, whether you want to call it the alt-right, whether you want to call it other extremist groups, Ku Klux Klan. Again, I don't think they've been terribly important historically over the last 7 decades, but they suddenly were given a voice. I think behind that, and again, this is something I don't blame Trump for per se, but I think it's part of the story of this campaign, is that the reason the media was so wrong is that they were not listening to the fact that there's a whole population out there that's quite angry about the direction America's taken as becoming a majority-minority society. This campaign, with all of its nastiness, unleashed an awful lot of statements that we're better off not making, number one, in public discourse. And number two is that having been empowered in this direction, when you have people running around yelling, "USA," that's a perfect expression. In and of itself, I couldn't care less. But as representative of a movement, of a trend, it should give us some concern. And frankly, he's talked about my work every day. Yeah, the leadership of the Jewish community cannot afford to stop monitoring anti-Semitism. The message should be that, yes, the country will survive, and that no society in diaspora Jewish history has been as receptive to Jewish participation as has this country. I think those trends will continue, but we can't relax our vigilance on them.
Today is November 9th, and this is Kristallnacht. Clearly, I'm not drawing an analogy, but I am reminding us of what November 9th meant for the Jews of Europe.
I don't understand the reference here.
Well, I actually do think that the Trump campaign, not officially, but unofficially, many of the people who were his greatest supporters, normalized a kind of traditional mainstream anti-Semitism that we haven't seen in decades.
Give me an example.
Well, the part that you were very much dismissing about the Jewish journalists is something that was very real. Seeing, again, not from the campaign, but seeing from the supporters. And this was very active on social media. Jewish journalists who were opposed to Trump were photoshopped wearing concentration camp uniforms. They were tweeted as if, you would look great as a lampshade.
Are we talking about any significant?
Yes.
Or are we talking about something that is, at best, fringe?
It was an ongoing.
I'm asking you, was it more than fringe?
I found it very alarming. Yes, I thought it was.
I understand, but any Jew's going to feel it alarming. I'm asking you to analyze it. Are we talking about because my reaction is, if you're telling me that there are crazies in America,
is Steve Bannon significant? Is Steve Bannon significant?
What did Steve Bannon do?
He was the CEO of the campaign.
But what did he do that was anti-Semitic? What did he do? This is why people just go bananas. So far, I've heard that Trump said on stage something about Carly Fiorina. He did not. His comments about women were in private. And now I'm hearing a sort of a swipe at a guy who worked for him. I'm asking you, I know there are crazies in America. Do you think that the people who were putting these costumes onto American journalists are anything other than a lunatic fringe of America?
I saw something on Facebook the other day that was very hard not to laugh at, but it was some kid that went viral. Some kid, young man from Florida, was talking about Trump is going to get rid of Zionism. Zionism is the most important thing. We need to get rid of it. So the reporter said to him, what is Zionism? And he said, Zionism is where people get together and they control the media and they control the government and they brainwash us.
Okay.
And the answer is this fed a lot of the kind of anti-elite.
Okay, I want to ask you something. You have spoken passionately about J Street on JBS. There are aspects of J Street that bother you. Are there more people at the moment sympathetic to a left-leaning, hard left-leaning liberal view of Israel and demonizing Israel? Are there more or less of those than there are what you fear are people putting pictures on social media?
Well, look, what I was going to say, in fact, I was going to get to the left, because we've known, you and I have discussed this on your show many times. The left does it in a more insidious way, because the left's position is, this is a human rights issue. It's about the poor Palestinians, and it's about Israel being a regional bully and Israel being a colonialist power. And that's the story that the left likes, the progressive left. But
that's the anti-Israel progressive
left. Right, the anti-Israel.
Yeah.
But to see something that we have not seen since the 1930s, a kind of normalization.
It's not normal.
All right. Well, look, let's
wait and see.
Let's see how this gets played out.
Fringe.
Look, it doesn't compare with the 1930s, and I can show you real anti-Semitism then that does not exist today. It's the only period we really had organized anti-Semitism in this country, including presidential candidates, third-party candidates to be sure, but they were national figures. I don't think that we face an existential danger here, and in that respect, we should not be fanning the flames of hysteria or paranoia. There is no grand conspiracy to eliminate the Jews. Even the rhetoric of a conspiracy, Jews tend to shy away from it because we've had bad experiences with it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's directed against Jews. I think it's fair to say the real issue is extremism versus moderation and the power of moderation. The country does very well, regardless of whether your politics are right or left. The country does better with centrist administration.
Absolutely.
Okay, so therefore, our hope right now is that the extremist elements that were quite vocal
on both sides.
Well, fair enough, but one side won.
Yes,
okay.
But don't say fair enough as if there was. It's not the reality. The reality was
there were extremist elements on both sides.
Exactly.
Okay, can those extremist elements be marginalized, or are they going to become much more central and normative for the next 4 years?
I'd like to go back to your Jewish community question. I think that's where you want to go. And I think that one of the interesting things we're going to see now is how the social activism of the Jewish community reacts to this election. And I think it's very interesting. One of the common social media posts I saw all morning long, well, actually starting from last night, was the famous quote from the union organizer, Joe Hill, "Don't mourn, organize." And I think that's actually a positive message, again, to our younger generation who worked very hard, both on this election, to elect the first female president, and they're despairing. And a lot of the buzz has been, we have to organize. If you don't like the outcome of an election, there's an election in 2 years. And I think you're not going to get a lot of the younger generation to sit back and say, well, let's give Trump a chance. Let's just watch and see if he magically gets rid of all that old rhetoric that we heard for the last year and also becomes a unifier. They're actually not, the young people tend to not want to react that way, and I understand that. And even people in my generation are going to say this was bad rhetoric, bad positions, let's go to work. But I think that's a positive impulse. I think you're going to find from a lot of the Jewish liberal organizations, we have to keep on our issues. You know, you don't stop, you keep working on your issues, you keep organizing, and you hope for better results because you put in the time.
I think beautifully said. Look, we are out of time here for the first hour. So we're going to just continue this, and I appreciate the fact that all of you are going to stay with me. You've been watching Barbara Fix, Ken Bobb, Steven Bayme, Thane Rosenbaum, and you've heard them really react to what has been a very surprising election for almost all of America, as Donald Trump has become now President of the United States. What I now want to speak to them about, with you as well, what does it mean for the American-Israeli relationship? The relationship that Barack Obama had with Israel was in many ways fabulous and in many ways very troubling to those in the Jewish community. What do we expect now out of a Trump administration? So we're going to continue this next time. I hope you stay with us. Right now, my thanks to Ken Bobb, Thane Rosenbaum, Barbara Fix, and to Steve Bayme. And as always, I invite you to be in touch with me with any thoughts or comments you may have to anything our guests have said on this edition of L'chaim. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. L'chaim, my friends, to life.
L'chaim is a presentation of Jewish education in media.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.